I'd been keeping my head down for years, doing whatever I could to stay afloat. At 54, I was stuck in a job I hated, working long hours just to pay the bills. Ellen didn't work, and her family always looked down on me. Her brother Chad, always quick to point out my lack of ambition as he paraded his fancy job in finance, was the worst of them. But it wasn't him who broke me. It was Dan, my father-in-law, at his birthday dinner last month. He called me useless in front of everyone, told me I was a failure and that my low-paying job made me worthless. I felt small, exposed, drowning in the weight of his words. Ellen, silent, as usual. The worst part was my kids, my own kids, sitting there, watching me get torn apart, and I couldn't even defend myself. That night, I swore I'd had enough. But I never imagined things would turn out the way they did. A few weeks later, I discovered something that shifted everything, my side hustle, the thing I'd been quietly working on for years, buying old homes, fixing them, flipping them, was growing. Slowly, quietly, it was turning into something real, and I never saw it coming. I'd always kept it a secret, afraid they'd ridicule me for trying to do something beyond my regular job, but now, I found out my business was worth $3 million. All this time, I'd been building something they couldn't see, something that was mine, and it hit me. I was done hiding. I didn't care what Ellen or her family thought anymore. It was time to show them who I was. But then, the kicker. Ellen asked about the extra money in our account. I told her it was from my business, and her face dropped. She had no idea. Not once had she asked about it. She'd never noticed how late I stayed up, how much effort I put into those projects. All those years of me working my ass off, and she didn't even know. Her shock quickly turned to anger. "You've been lying to me," she said, the words cutting. "You've been hiding this from me, and that's not fair." I stood there, stunned. This was the woman I'd been sacrificing everything for. All these years of carrying the weight of our family, and now this? I tried to keep my cool, but I couldn't. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you because I knew you'd never understand. I did this for us, Ellen, for you, for the kids, but now I'm done." Her eyes filled with frustration. "I didn't ask about it, but you should have told me. You should have been transparent." But it wasn't about transparency. It was about the fact that all this time I'd been working myself into the ground, and she'd never once noticed, not once. I could feel the weight of what she said. Her words made it clear. I wasn't just hiding my success, I was hiding myself. I spent the next few days in a fog, replaying Dan's words over and over. Useless, failure, worthless. The weight of it all kept circling my head, like I was stuck in some kind of mental loop I couldn't break. It wasn't the first time I'd felt small in front of Ellen's family, but it was the first time I'd had to face it so directly. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that for years I'd been quietly working on something on the side. I'd been buying old homes, fixing them up, and flipping them. I never told anyone about it, not Ellen, not the kids, not even my friends. I kept it low-key, afraid that if they knew, they'd laugh, tell me it was a pipe dream, that I was just wasting time. I thought about how I'd kept it all under wraps. For years, I'd been doing exactly what they said I couldn't. I was building something real, but none of them had ever seen it. They didn't see the late nights, the weekends spent scraping paint and fixing floors, the endless phone calls with contractors. And I wasn't about to tell them. It was too risky, too easy for them to belittle it, dismiss it as nothing more than a hobby. But the numbers didn't lie. My side hustle, which had started small and uncertain, was now worth $3 million. I sat with that number for a minute, feeling the weight of it settle in. $3 million. It wasn't a lot to some people, but it was mine, all mine. And the fact that no one knew about it, that I had to hide it from the people closest to me, stung in a way I couldn't ignore. I couldn't stand the idea of living under Chad's shadow anymore. He'd made it clear that he thought I was beneath him, and Ellen, my wife, had never once tried to defend me. Maybe she didn't even know how. She had her own ways of looking at the world. The truth was I was tired of living like I was invisible to them, so I made a decision. I was done hiding. It was time to show them that I had a future beyond the job they all looked down on. I didn't care anymore if they judged me. Then something hit me. I had always thought that Ellen would understand, eventually, that she would notice how hard I'd been working, how much I'd been sacrificing to make this happen for our family. But now I realized she hadn't noticed at all. She had no idea how much I'd been doing behind the scenes. It hit me hard when I checked the bank account one night, and I saw her surprise when she asked about the extra money. She'd never asked before, not once. I had been careful not to make a big deal out of it, but there was always a part of me that hoped she'd pick up on it. She never did. She'd been taking my financial success for granted, assuming that everything was just fine. She had never thought to ask how I was making the money that supported us. And in that moment, I realized that maybe she wasn't just clueless. She was comfortable with the idea that I was the one always doing the heavy lifting. She had never cared enough to know what was actually going on. It was a tough pill to swallow, because in the end, it wasn't just about the money. It was about respect. The respect I had been giving them all these years. The respect I thought I'd earned, but had never really received. It felt like I had been invisible in my own life. I had built something real, something worth fighting for, and they hadn't even noticed. A week later, Ellen casually asked about some extra money she noticed in the bank account. The way she said it, like it was no big deal, irritated me right off the bat. She didn't seem suspicious, just curious. I was tired of keeping it all in, so I answered honestly. "It's from my business," I told her. "The house flipping." Her expression went blank. She stared at me for a long second, like I'd just told her I was secretly running a casino or something. I don't understand," she said, her voice shaky. "How much money are we talking about here?" I let out a breath. "Enough that I've been able to save up a pretty decent amount. It's worth a few million now." Her eyes widened. "Millions? And you didn't tell me?" I had to bite back the frustration that came flooding in. "I didn't think it was necessary. I've been doing this for a long time, Ellen. It's not like I've been keeping it from you to hide it. I just never felt like it was the right time to bring it up." She blinked at me, almost like she didn't know how to process it. And then something in her shifted. The shock turned into something else. Resentment. "You've been hiding this from me," she said, her voice tight. "All this time, and you've been lying to me. I don't understand why you wouldn't share this with me, why you kept it a secret." I stood there, completely stunned. Lying? How was this lying? I'd worked my ass off for this. It was all for her, for the kids, to make things better for all of us. "I wasn't lying, Ellen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wasn't hiding anything for the hell of it. I just didn't think you'd be interested. I've been busting my ass for years trying to make something out of this. And yeah, maybe I should have told you sooner, but it wasn't about me not trusting you." She crossed her arms, and her face was red now. "That's bullshit, and you know it. You should have been more transparent. I'm your wife. We're supposed to share things. And you've been doing this behind my back. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to our family." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. I had been working my ass off, and for what? To be accused of being deceitful? It stung worse than anything Dan had ever said to me. "You think this was easy?" I shot back, my anger building. "I've been working 14-hour days, staying up late, dealing with contractors, paperwork, the whole damn mess. I didn't hide it because I didn't want you to know. I hid it because I didn't think you'd understand." She scoffed. "That's a convenient excuse. You could have at least told me what was going on. Instead, I've been left in the dark while you've been making money on the side and not saying a word." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I stood there, frozen. Everything I had done, everything I'd worked for, had been for this family. I didn't want to be the guy working some dead-end job just to keep the lights on. I wanted more for us, for me, for all of us. But now, it seemed like even my success was a betrayal to her. And then, in the quiet that followed, she hit me with something that really stung. "You've always just taken care of everything," she said, her voice quieter now, but still sharp. "I never had to worry about money because you always made it work, but I never stopped to think about how hard it was for you. I relied on you." I stood there, feeling the weight of her words. It was like a truth I didn't want to hear, but couldn't deny. She'd relied on me all these years, on the outside looking like everything was fine, like I had it all under control. But inside, I'd been drowning, and she never noticed. Or maybe she didn't care. The silence between us was thick. I wanted to yell, to scream, but what good would it do? There was nothing left to say. I realized then that my success didn't just feel like a betrayal to her. It had made me realize that, all along, I'd been living her life, not my own. I couldn't stop thinking about what Ellen had said, the way she looked at me like I'd betrayed her. It gnawed at me. But it wasn't just her. It was the whole damn family. They had never respected me. To them, I was just the guy with a regular job. The guy who didn't have the drive or the ambition they all had. I spent years bending over backwards to prove them wrong, and still, they saw me as nothing special. I couldn't take it anymore. All those years of quietly sacrificing, of hiding the work I was doing. And for what? For them to look at me like I was still just a failure? One evening, I walked out to my car after work. The weight of everything that had happened, everything I'd been holding in, settled on my chest. I sat in the driver's seat and just stared out the windshield. For what felt like forever, I didn't move. I could hear my own breath, slow and heavy. It was like the world had finally stopped spinning, and all I could do was listen to the sound of my own thoughts. It wasn't just Ellen's reaction that hurt me. It was everything. The way Dan had always belittled me. The way Chad's smugness had never been questioned. The way Ellen never once asked me how I was holding up, how I was really doing. She took everything I gave her for granted, and in that moment, I realized something. I didn't owe them anything. I had been hiding my success, sure, but I was done doing that. I'd spent too long trying to make them comfortable with my life. I had a plan now, a real plan, and it was time for me to show them who they were really dealing with. I started taking steps, small ones, but each one felt like I was pulling myself further out of their shadow. I knew I couldn't keep doing things the way they expected me to. I had to separate myself from all of it. So I began putting together a deal, a big one. The kind of deal that would give me financial independence from everything they thought I needed. A property that would push my business even further, and finally get me out from under their thumb. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need their approval, their validation. I wasn't going to be the guy who just sat back and took their insults anymore. I was done. I wasn't just building a business, I was building a future for me, for once. And I wasn't asking anyone's permission to do it. I didn't know exactly how things would play out. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life. A couple of months later, I closed a deal on a property that changed everything. It was a huge one, a lake house, the kind I used to dream about when I was younger, sitting on a porch, looking out at the water. It added another $2 million to my portfolio. But this wasn't just about the money. No, this was about proving something to myself. Proving that I could make it without Dan, without Ellen, without anyone telling me I was worthless. I didn't care anymore. This time, I was doing it for me. I wasn't asking for anyone's approval, and I wasn't apologizing for it. I bought that house on the lake, put my name on the deed, and just let it sit there the way it should. My place. For the first time in my life, something was mine, and only mine. No one had a claim on it. No one had the right to question it. Of course, I knew they would find out. The family always did, and when they did, I knew the truth would hit them harder than I expected. It wasn't just the money, it was the fact that I had taken control of my life and wasn't asking them for permission anymore. The phone call came a week later. It was Dan. I hadn't heard from him in ages, and honestly, I hadn't expected to. "I see you've been busy," he said, his voice low, like he was trying to sound casual but couldn't quite mask the judgment. I held back the urge to snap. "Yeah, been putting in the work." "Well," he said, his tone changing just a little, "I hope you're finally starting to see what real work looks like." I didn't even know how to respond. Dan, who had never had a clue about what real work was now acting like he was the one who had helped me get here. It was infuriating, but at the same time, it didn't faze me the way it used to. "I'm doing just fine, Dan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Real work looks different to different people. I'm living mine now, and it's working." There was a long silence on the other end, and for a second I thought he might hang up. But then, in that typical way he had, he tried to act like everything was fine. "Well, I guess you figured it out," he said, a little too flat to be genuine. "Guess it's good to see you finally making something of yourself." I let that hang in the air for a moment before replying, "Yeah, guess it is." And that was it. The call ended just like that. No congratulations, no real acknowledgement of what I had done. But I didn't need it. It was clear to me now, I was never going to get approval from Dan, and I was okay with that. The only person I needed approval from was me. When I hung up, I sat there for a minute, thinking about what had just happened. The weird thing was, I didn't feel any rush of satisfaction. I didn't need Dan to come around. I didn't need anyone to acknowledge what I had done. It was my success, and I had finally stopped caring whether they recognized it. Ellen called me the next day. She wanted to meet. I could feel the tension in her voice when she said it. I didn't even need to hear the rest of it. I knew what was coming. We sat down at the small diner by the lake, the one we used to go to before everything got so complicated. I could tell she'd been stewing over things, trying to figure out what to say. But when she spoke, it came out like a slap. "You didn't have to go so far," she said, staring at me with that look I hated. "You've been making all this money, but you kept it from me. I don't understand why." I didn't know what she wanted me to say. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, for the way she was trying to piece everything together. But I couldn't anymore. I'd spent so much time trying to make everyone else comfortable, trying to fix things, and all I'd done was get buried under their expectations. "I didn't keep it from you, Ellen," I said, my voice flat. "I didn't think you'd understand. You don't get what I've been doing. You don't know what it's like, working day after day, flipping houses, dealing with contractors, dealing with everything else that comes with it. I didn't hide it because I wanted to. I hid it because I had to." She opened her mouth, about to say something, but I couldn't let her spin this into something else. "I'm done being treated like a failure," I interrupted. "I've been working my ass off for years, and you never saw it. You never asked, and now you act like I did something wrong by finally taking control of my own life. I'm not doing this anymore." Her face twisted, the anger and hurt fighting for space in her expression. "I'm your wife. I should have known. You don't keep this kind of thing from me." "Maybe I should have told you earlier, but what good would it have done?" I said, my voice growing colder. "You never once cared to ask what was really going on. You took it all for granted, the money, the bills, everything. You let me carry all of it while you stayed comfortable, never once wondering what I was really dealing with." She stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said, her voice shaky now. "You're just going to walk away?" I didn't even flinch. "I'm moving out. I've built this life for me, not for anyone else. It's mine now." The words hung in the air between us like a wall, cold and heavy. She didn't say anything for a long time, just stood there, staring at me. I couldn't tell if she was processing it or if she was too angry to think straight. "You really think it's over?" she asked, her voice cracking. "That easy? You're just going to walk away like nothing matters?" I met her gaze, holding my ground. "Yeah, I do." The silence stretched on, and I could see her trying to come up with something to say, something to make me change my mind. But I was done. I was done playing the part of the guy who took everyone's shit and never asked for anything in return. I had my own life now. A week later, Chad showed up at my new house. It wasn't a surprise. Part of me had been expecting him, the way he liked to insert himself into everyone's business. He stood in my living room, arms crossed, like he was trying to figure out how to handle me. "You've gone too far," he said, his voice almost pleading. "You're being stubborn. You need to stop with this 'I don't need anyone' crap." I didn't even let him finish. "I'm not doing this with you, Chad. You don't get it. You never have." He sighed, shaking his head like I was the one who'd lost it. "You're not thinking clearly. This is stupid." "Maybe," I said, my voice sharp now. "But I'm not asking you for your approval anymore." I watched him leave, feeling the weight of what had just happened. There was no going back, not with him, not with Ellen, not with any of them. The moment of clarity had hit hard, and now there was no choice but to move forward. Chad's visit didn't go the way he planned. He spent a few minutes talking, trying to lay out his usual line about how I was making a mistake, how I was throwing my life away by cutting ties with the family. He went on about how stubborn I was, how I was acting like this whole thing was personal. I didn't let him finish. "I don't need your approval anymore," I said, cutting him off. I felt a calmness in my voice, something I hadn't had in years. "I spent so long trying to get you to respect me, to make you see me as something more than just the guy who works a desk job. But I don't care about that anymore." He stared at me, mouth open, like he didn't know how to respond. "The business wasn't about impressing you," I continued. "It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about showing my kids and myself that I'm capable of anything. I'm not just the guy who drags himself through a job he hates. I'm a businessman. I've built something." Chad's eyes flickered with something between surprise and frustration. He opened his mouth like he was going to argue, but I held up a hand. "No, this isn't up for discussion. I've made my peace with it. You need to make yours." I watched him walk out, shaking his head as if he still couldn't believe what had just happened, but it didn't matter. As the door clicked shut behind him, I felt something shift in me, something that had been missing for years. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval or their damn opinions. I had something they'd never understand. I had built this life, and it was mine. A couple of months passed before I heard from Dan again. The call came out of nowhere, just as I was finishing up some paperwork. I glanced at the phone when I saw his name, and for a moment, I considered not answering, but I did. "Dan," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice uncharacteristically calm. "Can we meet?" I felt my stomach tighten. What could he possibly want now? But there was a part of me that needed to hear this, needed to see how he'd spin it. "Fine," I said. "Where?" He gave me the time and place, and we agreed to meet the next day. I hung up and sat there for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. Part of me wanted to ignore it all, just keep going with my life, leaving them behind. But another part of me knew this conversation was inevitable. Whatever he had to say now, I was ready. The diner was quiet, one of those hole-in-the-wall places that had seen better days, but somehow still had its charm. Dan was already seated when I walked in, looking like he was trying too hard to act casual. He waved me over to the booth, his smile tight but forced. I sat down across from him, and for a second, neither of us said anything. He took a sip of his coffee, then leaned forward like he was about to get into something important. "So," he said, looking me over, "how's your little business going?" He said the words with a hint of judgment, though he tried to keep it light. "Made any more good investments?" I could feel my pulse pick up, but I kept my face neutral. "It's doing great, more than great, actually." Dan's eyes flickered, but he recovered quickly. "Well, that's good. I mean, I always knew you could make something of yourself if you tried hard enough. I just didn't want to see you get hurt, that's all. I was concerned, you know." The words hit me, but not in the way he thought they would. It was the same old thing, him trying to take credit for my success, or brush it off like it didn't matter. I wasn't buying it anymore. I leaned in, locking eyes with him. "No, Dan, you weren't concerned. You were judgmental. You treated me like I was nothing, like I couldn't do anything right. All these years, you made me feel small, like I didn't matter." His face tensed, and I could see the gears turning as he tried to figure out how to backpedal. "I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly, raising his hands in mock defense. I cut him off. "It doesn't matter what you meant. The damage is done. Your judgment, the way you looked down on me, made me realize something. I don't need your approval, and I sure as hell don't need to keep playing by your rules." Dan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else. But instead, he just nodded, his gaze flicking away. I stood up, pushing the chair back with a little more force than necessary. "I'm done. You'll never see me the same way again, and honestly, I don't care anymore." I walked out without another word, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me as I stepped into the crisp air outside. There was no anger, no bitterness, just peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had finally broken free from all their expectations. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need to apologize for who I was or how I had gotten here. Later that night, as I sat in my new house by the lake, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from Ellen. "I've been thinking a lot. I'm proud of what you've done." For a moment, I just stared at the words. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't an apology or some big emotional breakthrough. But it was enough. And for the first time, I felt like I had reached a place where I could be proud of myself, regardless of what anyone else thought. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about peace. And for the first time in years, I had it.